Good evening everyone, welcome to yet another video, and today we're going to be going over some reserve vehicles and beginner choices for War Thunder. Now, before we get into it, I just want to discuss very briefly what we're going to be doing today, and basically the gist of it is why should you be choosing Britain, the pros and cons of Britain, and also I'm going to at the very end of the video throw in one tip as to how one should play Britain, especially at such a low BR. But without further ado, let us get on into it. So firstly, why Britain? Well, when a new player signs up with or downloads War Thunder and creates their account, whatever login details, they are greeted with a screen that basically shows them a tutorial and a nation, or a couple of nations if I'm not mistaken, that you can select from, and that being either you choosing a singular ground vehicle or a singular airplane, an air vehicle more specifically. So quickly, the starting vehicles for Britain are Tux Gladiator and then the A13 Mark 1. For the USA, it is the M2A4 First Armored Division, and then Gala's F3F2. For Germany, it's Flegel's Bf109, then the Panzer II-C DAC. For the USSR, it is the T-26 First Guards Tank Brigade, then Zhukov's I-15-3 M62 for the aviation. Japan is Hagiri's A5M4, then the Hago Commander for the ground aspect of it. The Chinese is the T-26 number 531 and the Hawk 3. Hawk 3 is a very good aircraft actually for low BR for what it is. For the Italians, it's Marclone's, sorry I don't know if I said that correctly, but his CR42CN and the L640 31st Regiment. Then that's for Italy. For France, it's the H39 Cambronne and Palia's D510. For Sweden, it's Ikob's J8A and the Stridsvagn M39. And Israel does not have any starter vehicles that are available for beginners because they start at 4.3 or 5.7 and 6.0. So that is just a very quick rundown of the starter vehicles available for beginner players, and I'm going to, again, like I said, be speaking specifically about Britain. Now, the reason why you should choose Britain, well, if you're choosing the ground tech tree, you have solid shots in APHE as well as an APC-BC round with a significant amount of penetration. So your penetration for this is 89 millimeters, which, to give you an idea, the let's choose the Russians. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. I think the most heavily armored Russian low tier vehicle is probably going to be the T-35, and that only has 30 millimeters of penetration. For Germany, I don't think there's anything. Maybe the Panzer IVs. Yeah, they also only have 30 millimeters. Okay, this one has 50, but that's the 4E and it's a 2.0. Likewise for America, okay, but the Jumbo is at a far higher BR than what we're working with. The M2, which has 28 mils of armor, and then there's one tank in particular, the D2, that I'd like to check. Yeah, so even the most heavily armored vehicles like the D2 is probably one of the more heavily armored vehicles in the reserve bracket or the rank 1 bracket. The A13 has enough penetration to go through the frontal armor at 10 meters and even at 100 meters of all of the above mentioned tanks, and it's got a 40 millimeter gun, which makes it fairly effective with post-penetration damage, which in War Thunder we call, well, in tanks we call SPAL. And essentially what that, I don't know why that's not installed, weird. And essentially what that means is the shrapnel behind your shell after it penetrates the frontal armor, or any armor in fact, of a enemy vehicle. Your APHE shell, which has even more post-penetration damage or post-pen damage, 66 mils of armor at no degree of deviation. So if you look on the bottom of the box that currently shows all the stats, it's 10 meters, 100 meters, 500 meters, etc, etc, and then the degrees or angle of attack in terms of degrees. And even at 60 degrees you have 25 millimeters of penetration, which is not a whole lot, and that is a very high ricochet angle, but it is still fairly good, which is the point I'm trying to convey. Now, the A13 itself does not have a whole lot of armor, 14 millimeters all round, and that basically is where the flaws of this vehicle stop. So this vehicle has excellent mobility. It's got a top speed of 48 km an hour. It's got a very low profile in terms of everything else. Then it's also a very light tank, so it moves very quickly. It's got a very good turning circle, and it comes with a smoke grenade launcher. So in case you find yourself in a very tight position, or a bit of a awkward position rather, you can smoke up and reverse out of there with a relative ease. So that is basically the gist of the A13, and that is also why I think you should get it. Now, I don't have the Tux Gladiator, but I do have the Sea Gladiator, and it pretty much plays exactly the same. The only difference is the Tux Gladiator has a premium bonus and the Sea Gladiator doesn't. A Sea Gladiator, like all biplanes, is very maneuverable, but the Sea Gladiator has a very good top speed of 400 km an hour. That is at 4,000 meters, but you can get that at a very low altitude as well. And it has very good armament in terms of its main sort of weaponry. I mean, it is 7.7s, so in that regard it's not too hectic, but it does have traces, stealth and universal, which is default for all aircraft, but the Sea Gladiator is just that much more efficient when it comes to using them. Now, the cons to this, I'll start with the Sea Gladiator since we've just covered it, and indeed the other two aircraft that I have in this lineup, the V156B1 and then the Fury Mark 1, they are very sensitive to fire. So if your aircraft catches a light, that's basically it. And if the opponent, which at this BR is more unlikely than not, if the opponent knows what ammunition to be taking into air arcade or even ground realistic battles where you are using combined arms tactics, this can be quite a problematic thing, because if you use universal rounds, then it tends to set the plane alight more frequently. However, that being said, aside from that negative, the planes also tend to overheat. Their engines tend to overheat very quickly, so that is also something else that needs to be taken into consideration if you don't want to micromanage your aircraft too much in terms of throttle management. However, in terms of positives, like I said, the aircraft all have very effective weaponry. The V156 carries a 1,000 pound bomb, which is very effective, and you can set a fuse for it to detonate 1 second after you've dropped it, and after, if you're doing a bombing run and it lands on the ground and you fly away with enough of a fuse, you can do quite a significant amount of damage to the enemy and not yourself. The Sea Gladiator, like I said, is very maneuverable, and the same goes for the Fury. That is just standard for all biplanes. But like I said, the armament on them are sufficient enough to get the job done, and the speed that they provide is very good. So with that out of the way, let us quickly observe the ground vehicles that I have in the lineup here. So in terms of the ground vehicles, what I would suggest, since Britain at 1.0 and reserve has very little armor, I would highly suggest playing hide and seek tactics. In other words, finding a bit of cover and waiting for the enemy to come to you and opening up with a ambush. So aiming for the center of the hull. So for example, let's just take the A13 here. This is the tech tree variant, and this is also something that you will have immediate access to because it is a reserve vehicle. You open up, let's actually just pull up the armor units here and do a protection analysis. And let's just take the where is it now? This one. So let's just for all intents and purposes under 100 meters and side shot. So in this case the tank is driving past, you are in your A13 and you shoot here, and look at the damage that it inflicts upon the tank. So you're taking out his commander and you're doing a little bit of damage to the rest of his crew. The best shot with the A13 is front of the turret, but on the side of the hull, because you hit the ammo rack and you get a very good damage on the crew. Alternatively, you can aim just straight up for the side of the turret and you would take it out. So that is obviously the best way to sort of take out enemy vehicles, because that logic then also applies to German and Russian tanks and even the American tanks, although most of the time they will be on your team, so you don't need to worry too much about facing off against American guns and tanks. The cons, again, like I said about the A13, the premium, is the amount of armor, and like I said earlier in the statement, Britain at 1.0 and reserve does not have a lot of armor. Most nations do not, but Britain more so because they value speed and mobility and having a relatively decent gun over the survivability per se of the tank. So in this instance, the A13 has only 14mm of armor, and that goes for both the premium and the tech tree version. The Tetrarch has even less armor, or slightly more frontal armor with 16 mils, but then the rest of the armor is lacking sides and back with 14 and 10 respectively. If we look at the Daimler, which is the sort of the armored recon vehicle, recon car that the Brits have, 16, 14 and 10, or 10 and 14, sorry. And the same goes for the turrets. It's not a whole lot. So again, mobility over survivability and the ability to take a hit. If I quickly show you guys the Stuart, it's probably the more up armored thing or vehicle. Sorry, I'm looking at the Stuart 3. The Stuart 1 has 44 mils of armor front, which is still not a whole lot. It's a little bit more survivable perhaps than the Tetrarch or the A13, but it doesn't make that much of a difference. Even the A13 Mark II, which only has 30 mils of frontal armor, is still not exceptionally survivable. So Britain at reserve and 1.0 battle rating does not have massive survivability or the ability to take a hit because it lacks a lot of armor. However, this is, like I said, made up quite comfortably, or compensated for quite comfortably, firstly by the speed that these vehicles possess. They are very fast. These vehicles have sufficient mobility to outrun pretty much everything on the battlefield with relative ease. And also their gun, like I said, is very good. This one is a 40mm, it's a 2-pounder cannon. This is also a 2-pounder cannon, also 2-pounder cannon, and I think this one's also, yeah, 2-pounder cannon. So this 2-pounder or 40mm gun that the Brits have is very effective. It has, all of them have APHE. Let me cross-check that. Okay, yeah, so all of them have APHE. Let me just purchase this while I'm here. All of them have APHE, all of them have smoke grenades, so they have the ability to mask their movement with the smoke grenades, and the APHE round has amazing post-penetration damage, but they all have APCBC rounds, or armor-capped ballistic capped rounds, which is this one at the very bottom of the research modification tree. It's a rank 4 modification, and it is, like I said, present on all the British tanks. For some reason my Daimler doesn't have it. Now it does. So that is basically the gist of the pros and cons of the British reserve tech tree. Personally, I like the playstyle Britain provides. It is very good. It's very unique in the sense that it is mobility and firepower over the ability to take a hit and tanker shot, so to speak. So that is my personal preference. I like mobility and firepower over the sort of ability to withhold and withstand a shot, sorry, and be a bullet sponge. So for me, that is a playstyle that I enjoy, and if you enjoy that playstyle in other games, then Britain is very much the nation for you. Now, the best advice that I can give for playing Britain is to utilize the fact that you have, for the A13s, a shoulder stabilizer, which essentially means that under 8 k's an hour, sorry, for those in freedom units, I do not know what it is in miles per hour, but under 8 k's an hour you have a stabilizer, which means if you put it onto autopilot, so if you press E once, it should be your default key. If you press E once, it should bring up a little thing in the corner here saying CC1, and that's basically automated driving. It's cruise control level 1, and that's under 8 k's an hour, and it allows you to fire a very, very good shot on the move, and that is by far the most useful ability of the British tanks, because nothing at the BR has the same ability. So I'm going to show you here. There we go. I'm on CC number 1, and we are just going to see it is a very, very stable shot. So that is the APC BC round, the armor capped ballistic round, and you can see we go very easily through the front plate of this Panzer II. Now I'm going to switch to the armor piercing high explosive round. And there we go, we see a center shot destroys the enemy tank. Now I'm quickly going to skedaddly do over to this Panzer IV over here, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to demonstrate the ability this tank has. But while we are on the drive, I'm going to take a shot. Let me just stop so we can bring our turret around. I'm going to take a shot at this tank here, and I'll show you what I mean by the side shots. So the commander, loader, transmission and radiator, and then once again, and then a third shot if he comes back into view. I'm going to speed up. You can see the sight begins to shake quite viciously. Oh, sorry, Panzer. The sight begins to shake quite viciously when I go over 8 k's an hour, and that's because the stabilizer is then null and void, is no longer effective. So we're just going to go CC1 again here. And again, the stabilizer in showcase here, driver loader, and this tank here is a rank 2 tank in front of me, German tank, and my reserve vehicle was able to quite easily deal with it. So that is just a very small demonstration of the power of the A13. It makes it very, very effective and very, very capable at dealing with enemy forces on the field, especially on urban maps, because you're not going to be going that fast. So yeah, I mean, if that's how you enjoy playing games in general, with mobility and firepower being your key aspects, then Britain is definitely the thing for you. Now again, coming back to my tip, utilizing the stabilizer, but I'm going to throw in another bonus tip here because I think it is very, very important. If we quickly draw our eyes to the top left hand corner here, we see vertical guidance statistic. So what that means in very simplistic terms is the ability for your gun to lift up and down within your turret, and that is also known as elevation and depression. So we see that the vertical guidance of this particular tank is negative 15 degrees and positive 20 degrees. Now for reference, essentially that would look like something along the lines of, now if you can imagine his barrel pointing down at where the mouse sort of is, that's a very, very, very sharp angle for him to be shooting at, and most tanks don't have that ability. Britain is very, very fortunate in the sense that it has a very, very good vertical guidance. It can shoot high and it can shoot very low. That is an advantage you need to use very, very effectively and very, very often over your opposition. But that does lead to another problem. and that is another problem that I will elaborate on in the next video. Unfortunately guys, that is all I have time for today. I hope this video helps you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy this video as much as I did making it, and I hope it provides some indication as to what nation you should definitely sign up for. But like I said, it does lead to another video where we will talk about the problem that having this can lead to. Very good vertical guidance. It does lead to another problem, but we'll talk about that in another video. Until then guys, stay safe, please look after yourselves and take care. Bye for now.